I was 18, and I thought the world was simple. There are rules. There's me. There are those who try to break those rules. I didn't get a job as a security guard at a nightclub because I dreamed of it. I just needed money. Easy, quick money. The night shift, music, alcohol, drunk people, conflicts that always end the same way. Someone yells, someone leaves, someone stays outside the door. I thought I was in control, that I was strong, that I was right. That night, everything was as usual until he showed up. He didn't yell, he didn't stagger, he was dressed expensively, too casually for this place. People like that don't ask permission. They're confident the door will open for them. I asked for my ID. He smiled as if it were a joke. Then he gave me his name. I didn't know it, and I didn't care. Closed for you today. He looked at me as if I'd said something personal. Then he leaned closer and quietly, almost amiably, offered me money. It was enough to last me a few months. I refused. He offered me more. I refused again. He started talking as if I were a flaw in the system that would soon be fixed. I wasn't thinking, I was acting. One kick, not hard, not demonstrative, just to push me away. He landed awkwardly, his back concrete, a crunch I heard even over the music. He didn't scream, he simply stopped moving. A few minutes later, I was sitting in the guard room. A few hours later, at the station. A few months later, in the courtroom where they explained to me that one impulse can cost a person their entire life. His life, and mine too. 20 years. When the cell door closed behind me, I was 19. I thought it was temporary, that I would count the years, get out, and start over. I didn't understand one thing back then. Prison doesn't waste time. It rewrites you completely. For the first few months, I was a nobody. Thin, angry, silent. Here they respect neither age nor being right. Here they respect either strength or the ability to survive. Better yet, both. I started lifting weights not for the body, for the space, so that they would stop pushing me, checking me, testing me. The years passed. I became part of the system, not important, stable. I was known. They took me into account. I didn't interfere, I didn't blab, I didn't promise. In prison, authority is when your silence weighs more heavily than anyone else's words. I stopped thinking about life outside the walls. There, everything became alien. Here, it became understandable. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that I wasn't afraid of the future, because I simply didn't see a future outside these walls. Here I have a name. There is respect. There is order. There is emptiness. One day, my cellmates approached me, quietly, cautiously. Conversations like these don't start casually. They were talking about escape, the plan, the routes, the guards, the windows, the shifts. I listened and understood. If they failed, they'd drag everyone down. If they succeeded, hell would begin for those left behind. I was faced with a choice that breaks people: loyalty or survival, the system or chaos. I went to the guards, not right away, not out of fear, out of calculation. I knew that in prison they don't do anything for free. And when they asked me what I wanted in return, I didn't say money. I asked for something that can't be bought, and they agreed. That day I realized I'm no longer the guy at the club door. I'm part of this machine, and there's no escape. Prison doesn't reward honesty. It rewards usefulness. When I walked into that small gray office and told them about the escape plan, I didn't speak fast. I didn't beg. I spoke the way this place teaches you to speak, calm, precise, without emotion. I knew panic would make me look weak. And weakness is a bad currency here. The officer listened without interrupting. He didn't take notes. He already knew half of what I was saying. That's how prisons work. They are never blind, only patient. When I finished, he leaned back and asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want?" I didn't answer right away. I had thought about this for weeks without realizing it. In this place, you don't dream of freedom. You dream of control over your own suffering. I asked for a transfer to a quieter block, a single cell, protection without uniform standing next to me, access to the gym outside peak hours. And one more thing, something invisible. I asked to be left alone. No random searches, no unnecessary pressure, no games, they agreed. The escape attempt never happened. 2 men were caught with tools. 1 cracked during questioning. The rest fell apart quietly like a structure that was never strong to begin with. No one officially knew it was me. But prison has its own bloodstream. Information travels without words. From that moment on, my life here changed. I wasn't loud, I wasn't aggressive. I didn't walk around demanding respect. That's not how real authority works in prison. Authority is when people lower their voices around you without realizing it. When conflicts pause until you pass. When questions stop being asked in your presence. Some called me smart. Some called me cold. Some called me a traitor, but never to my face. At night, alone in my cell, the silence felt heavier than the noise ever did. I replayed that moment outside the club over and over, the kick, the fall, the sound. I told myself I didn't mean to cripple him, that it was an accident, that I was young. But prison strips excuses layer by layer. You are left only with what you did. I aged here faster than time outside. My body grew stronger, but my sense of life shrank. Birthdays stopped mattering, seasons became rumors. People came in broken and left harder, or didn't leave at all. Sometimes new inmates asked me if I regretted it. Regret is a strange word in prison. Regret implies another version of life waiting somewhere. I don't see that version anymore. I see corridors, schedules, faces that disappear. What I feel isn't regret, it's permanent awareness. I am respected here, I am safe, I am stable, and I am completely disconnected from the world I once thought I belonged to. The irony is brutal. I enforced rules once for minimum wage. One decision later, I live under rules forever and enforce them indirectly. This place didn't break me, it replaced me. And the worst part? If those walls opened tomorrow, I don't know who would walk out. Power in prison doesn't announce itself, it doesn't shout. It settles in quietly like dust that never leaves your lungs. By the time I realized what I had become, it was already too late to step back. New inmates started watching me before speaking, not because I was big, I wasn't the biggest, but because I was predictable. In prison, predictability is safety. I didn't explode, I didn't threaten, I didn't lie. When I spoke, people listened because they knew I wouldn't speak twice. There was an incident in the shower block that made everything clear. A younger guy, new, nervous, still carrying the outside in his eyes, got cornered by 2 inmates who smelled weakness the way animals do. It wasn't about money or respect, it was about testing limits. That's how violence starts here. I didn't step in loudly, I didn't threaten, I just stood there and said one sentence. Not here. That was it. They hesitated. One of them smiled, trying to save face. The other looked at the floor. They walked away. No fight. No blood. The kid didn't even thank me. He didn't need to. He had just witnessed how this place really works. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because something clicked in my head. I realized that if I had stepped outside those walls at that moment, I wouldn't know how to behave. Out there, power is hidden behind contracts, smiles, and laws. In here, it's honest. Brutal, but honest. I started understanding the rhythm of prison better than I ever understood the rhythm of the city. I knew when trouble was coming before voices were raised. I knew when to stay silent and when to intervene. I could read tension in the air like weather. That scared me more than any threat ever did. Because adaptation feels like survival, until you realize it's transformation. Letters from outside stopped arriving. Not because no one cared, but because there was nothing left to say. People move on. Lives fill up. Prison stays empty in the same way every day. I stopped counting years. I started counting routines: wake up, gym, meals, silence, observation. I had become efficient here, useful, balanced. And then something happened that tested everything I believed about loyalty, respect, and the line I thought I would never cross again. A fight broke out in the yard. Real violence this time. Not posturing, not intimidation. Blood was involved. And one of the men was someone I had protected before. I had to decide in seconds. Step in and start a chain reaction I couldn't control. Or step back and allow the system to handle it. I chose to do nothing. That night I understood the most dangerous truth of prison life. You don't lose your humanity all at once. You trade it away piece by piece in moments that feel reasonable. And the more reasonable those moments feel, the deeper you are. Fear is loud, respect is silent. That's the difference I learned too late. After the fight in the yard, nothing changed on the surface. No official consequences, no lockdown, no names spoken out loud. But the atmosphere shifted, it always does. Violence leaves residue. You don't see it, but everyone breathes it in. The man who got hurt avoided my eyes afterward, not because he blamed me, but because he understood. In prison, understanding can hurt more than betrayal. He knew I had chosen stability over loyalty, order over chaos. And deep down, he would have done the same. That realization hardened something inside me. I stopped intervening unless absolutely necessary. I became a filter rather than a shield. Problems reached me already shaped, already decided. People didn't ask me to fight for them, they asked me to confirm outcomes. That's real authority. I noticed how guards interacted with me differently. Not friendly, not hostile, neutral. That kind of neutrality only comes when both sides know you're valuable but unpredictable. I wasn't an informant anymore. I was a stabilizer, someone who prevented fires instead of starting them. And that's how prisons truly function. Not through force, but through balance. At night, alone, the silence pressed against my thoughts. I thought about the businessman, about the life he lost, about the life I froze in time with one careless motion. I tried to imagine his mornings, his pain, his resentment. But the images came faded like old photographs. That scared me, because guilt should burn, and mine had started to cool. Years ago, I told myself I would never become one of them, never internalize the logic of cages and concrete. But here I was, fluent in it, comfortable, efficient. I watched new inmates arrive the way a doctor watches patients, already knowing who would break, who would adapt, and who would disappear inside themselves. Some begged, some threatened, some pretended they weren't afraid. I had been all of them once. One evening, a guard stopped by my cell longer than necessary. No words, just a look, a pause. That was the moment I understood another truth. Freedom is not taken all at once. It is renegotiated daily until nothing remains to reclaim. I wasn't serving time anymore. Time was serving me, and I didn't know whether that realization made me powerful or already lost. There is a moment in prison when you stop asking whether something is right or wrong. You only ask whether it is necessary. That moment came for me quietly. A man in our block had been causing instability for weeks. Loud, impulsive, always pushing boundaries. He wasn't dangerous by himself, but danger in prison isn't about strength, it's about unpredictability. He borrowed what he couldn't repay. He spoke too much. He didn't understand silence. I warned him once, calmly. No threats, just information. He laughed. A few days later, things escalated. Not into a riot, not into blood, just enough tension to make the guards nervous. When guards get nervous, pressure comes down hard. Everyone suffers. I was called in, not officially, no paperwork. Just a conversation framed as concern for overall stability. They didn't ask me to do anything. They didn't need to. All they needed was for me not to intervene when the time came, and I didn't. The man crossed the wrong line with the wrong people. It happened fast, brutal, efficient. When it was over, the block went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels organized. Later that week, I was moved again, better conditions, more privacy, fewer interruptions. Nothing was said out loud, but the message was clear. I had profited. That night, I didn't feel sick. I didn't panic. I didn't pray. I felt aligned. That scared me more than guilt ever did. Because alignment means acceptance. And acceptance is how you lose the last pieces of resistance without noticing. I told myself I hadn't caused it, that I hadn't ordered anything, that I had simply allowed events to follow their natural course. Prison logic is very good at creating clean explanations for dirty outcomes. Days passed, weeks, the memory dulled, the benefit remained. That's when I understood how this place really changes people, not through violence, but through reward systems. Do the right thing according to prison logic and the environment softens around you. Do the wrong thing, and it hardens. I had learned how to read those signals perfectly. I also learned something else. If I ever walked free, I would carry this logic with me, into conversations, into decisions, into relationships. Prison wasn't a chapter anymore. It was a framework. And frameworks don't disappear when walls do. Sometimes I wondered if the businessman thought about me, if he remembered my face, if he hated me, or if I had become just another blurry shape from a night that ruined everything. I don't dream about him. I dream about doors, about keys, about rooms where everyone waits for me to decide what happens next. That's how you know you've crossed the line. Prison is supposed to teach fear, fear of consequences, fear of loss, fear of time, but fear only works while there is something left to lose. I realized punishment had stopped working on me the day I was written up for something I didn't bother to deny. It wasn't serious, minor infraction, a technical violation. In another life, it would have bothered me. It would have made me careful. Here, it meant nothing. I accepted the sanction calmly, adjusted my routine, absorbed it like weather, and that's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. If punishment no longer shapes your behavior, then the system has either broken you or integrated you. I had been integrated. Authority had isolated me in a way violence never could. People respected me, but no one truly approached me. Respect creates distance. Fear creates noise. I lived in distance. Conversations ended when I entered a room. Decisions waited for my absence or my approval. It's a strange loneliness, to be surrounded by people and untouched by them. New inmates looked at me like a future version of themselves. Older ones looked at me like proof of a life that never restarted. Both projections were wrong, but I didn't correct them. In prison, letting people believe their own stories about you is safer than telling the truth. One evening, a counselor asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you think about life after release? I told him the truth. I don't know how to function in it. He didn't write anything down. That was the moment I realized something darker. Prison hadn't only shaped my behavior, it had rewired my expectations. Out there, choices are infinite and unclear. In here, everything is constrained and understandable. Structure becomes comfort, limitation becomes relief. I had stopped imagining a future. I was maintaining a system, and systems don't dream. Then came the offer, not freedom, not early release, something more subtle, a program, a responsibility, a semi-official role that came with privileges and expectations. They framed it as rehabilitation. I saw it for what it was, delegated order. I accepted without hesitation. That's when I crossed the final psychological boundary. I was no longer resisting the institution. I was helping it function. At night, I sat on my bunk and wondered whether this was survival or surrender. But the question didn't matter anymore. The result was the same. I wasn't counting years. I was managing equilibrium. Once you earn respect in prison, it's not given lightly. It comes at a cost. And the higher you climb, the heavier it becomes. I had become indispensable, not officially, not in a uniform, not in the books, but in the network that kept the wings functional. People listened when I spoke. They waited for my decisions. They deferred conflict to me. And with every nod, every silent acknowledgement, I realized that power in here was fragile. A whisper, a wrong move, and it could collapse entirely. One afternoon, a younger inmate, a kid not even 20, openly questioned a decision I had made regarding the distribution of a scarce commodity. His words were careless, but his intent was clear: challenge. I looked at him for a long time. I saw in his eyes what I had once had: arrogance, impatience, ignorance. In another context, I might have reacted with fury, but here, patience was stronger than violence. I let him speak. I let the room settle into a tense quiet. Then I explained calmly why his proposal couldn't work. Not as a lecture, but as a demonstration. By the end, he understood, or at least he pretended to. The lesson wasn't about logic. It was about boundaries, about survival, about learning that authority in a place like this isn't maintained by muscle alone. It is maintained by perception. And yet that perception has a dark side. Every nod, every act of compliance, every deferred decision makes you a target. People resent what they envy. People fear what they cannot control. And in prison, resentment doesn't stay quiet for long. I had friends. I had allies. But I also had enemies, subtle ones. Ones who would wait for me to slip, for me to miscalculate, for a single lapse to remind everyone that I was still human. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about strategy, anticipation, and discipline. My body, my mind, my decisions, every small action became a calculation. Every interaction was a test, and that was when I realized the ultimate truth. Here, trust is a currency more valuable than respect, more dangerous than fear, and harder to earn than freedom. Prison teaches you quickly that every choice carries consequences. And some choices are heavier than chains. The escape attempt was one of those moments. It started innocently enough, a whispered plan among a small group of inmates, carefully hushed in corners and behind closed doors. They spoke of cutting through fences, bribing guards, exploiting blind spots. It sounded almost cinematic, but in reality it was dangerous, reckless, and reckless people in prison rarely survive mistakes. I was approached. They wanted me to join, to coordinate, to be their inside link. I weighed it carefully. If I joined, I would risk everything. My status, my safety, even my life. The consequences of failure were instant death or a long stretch in solitary, a place worse than any battlefield I could imagine. But there was more than risk. There was opportunity. By turning them into the guards, I could negotiate a deal, secure something I had been eyeing for years. Better placement, privileges, and a small but significant slice of autonomy. The night of the planned escape, I walked the line between secrecy and revelation. Every word I spoke, every glance I gave, every move I made was a calculation. And in the end, I gave the guards the information they needed. The escape plan was crushed before it even started. My fellow inmates were furious, but the guards rewarded me. I gained not just privileges, but an unspoken influence over the remaining groups. They knew that I was both strategic and ruthless, that my loyalty was negotiable, and that crossing me carried consequences they could not ignore. The fear I inspired was subtle but absolute. It was not the kind of fear that screams, it whispers, it lingers in the back of your mind, reminding you that in here, power is survival and survival is everything. Yet with every gain, a shadow followed. I saw resentment grow even from people I considered allies. Prisoners do not forget betrayals even if they benefit indirectly. Every nod, every acknowledgement of my cunning, every whispered respect was mixed with the knowledge that I had turned on someone for my own advantage. I began to see a pattern. In here, morality was a luxury, trust was scarce, and every action carried both risk and reward. People around me became chess pieces. Some moved, some sacrificed, some removed themselves from the board entirely. And I learned that to survive, I had to anticipate not only my enemies, but also my friends. It was a delicate balance. I had power, but it was fragile. I had respect, but it was contingent. I had influence, but it required constant maintenance. And all the while I could feel the years slipping through my fingers. My youth had been traded for influence and survival. I had become an authority, but at a cost I could not quantify. And in the silence of the cell at night, I asked myself the question that never left me. Did I lose my freedom, or did I gain a kind of control that the outside world could never offer? Being an authority inside prison walls is a double-edged sword. On one side, you have respect, privileges, influence, and the subtle control over life and death decisions. On the other, every glance, every word, every misstep carries enormous consequences. Authority here is never secure. It's like holding a blade in your hands. One slip and it turns on you. I remember waking up each morning to the quiet tension that hung over the blocks. Prisoners watched everything, calculated everything. A small act of kindness could be interpreted as weakness. A harsh word could ignite a vendetta. I had learned early that survival here relied on perception as much as physical strength. People respected me because I had earned it, yes, but they feared me because I had proven that I would act without hesitation. Alliances formed and dissolved with the tides. A nod could mean loyalty for a week. A whispered insult could spark months of conflict. I learned to read the subtle cues, a twitch of the eye, the tightening of a jaw, the way someone stood when I approached. These micro-signals became as important as any physical display of power. I had also discovered a grim truth. Being powerful meant being isolated. The more influence I had, the fewer genuine connections I could trust. People came to me with requests, favors, confessions, or threats, but trust was always transactional. If I gave too much, I risked exploitation. If I gave too little, I risked mutiny. There was no middle ground. And then there were the moments of moral confrontation. Prisoners would push me to choose loyalty to a friend or loyalty to survival, justice or expedience, compassion or control. Every choice I made left a mark, reshaping the power dynamics around me. Betrayal was an ever-present shadow, and even when I chose wisely, I could never predict the ripple effects. The story of the escape attempt replayed in my mind often. The memory was not just about my tactical success, but about what it revealed about human nature. Fear, ambition, and desperation collide in ways that are brutal, illuminating, and sometimes horrifying. I had seen men crumble, schemes collapse, friendships dissolve, and opportunities vanish, all in the span of a few tense hours. Physical dominance mattered, of course, but psychological dominance was far more potent. A subtle glance, a quiet word, a controlled display of power could reshape an entire wing of prisoners. I became an expert in this silent negotiation, understanding that the most effective authority is often unseen yet deeply felt. People obeyed not because I threatened them at every step, but because they understood the consequences of disobedience and the rewards of alignment. Yet even with all this control, a quiet despair lingered. Prison had given me status, but it had taken my youth, my freedom, and the ordinary experiences of life outside. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when I imagined walking down a normal street, hearing the wind rustle through leaves, feeling the warmth of sunlight unfiltered by bars or concrete. Those moments were painful reminders that while I was a king within these walls, I was a prisoner in the world that mattered most. Inside these walls, survival was never simple. It was an intricate, constant game of strategy. Every interaction, every word, every decision mattered. You couldn't afford to act purely on impulse. In here, emotions were a liability, calculation was your shield, rivalries simmered beneath the surface like magma. Two men could smile and shake hands in the cafeteria, only for violence to erupt hours later over a whispered insult or a perceived slight. I had learned to read these undercurrents, the way someone shifted in their chair, the tone in a voice, the timing of a glance. All of it told a story. In prison, understanding the story before the act could save your life. My rise to authority had not been purely physical. Strength opened doors, yes, but influence was cemented through intellect, observation, and intimidation cloaked in fairness. If I punished too harshly, I would breed resentment. If I rewarded too generously, I would invite manipulation. Every choice had to strike the perfect balance between fear, respect, and trust. Then came the moments that truly tested loyalty. The escape attempt wasn't the only instance where I had to choose between my survival and solidarity with others. Offers came frequently. Secret deals, confidential information, alliances with hidden agendas. One slip could destroy my standing, or worse, my life. I learned to act with patience, letting others reveal their true intentions over time. In prison, patience was power. One day, a fight broke out over a trivial argument about shared territory. It could have escalated into chaos, but I intervened. Not with brute force alone, but with a display of calculated authority. Measured words, a calm but commanding presence, and a subtle reminder that the cost of rebellion would outweigh any temporary gain. Within moments, the tension shifted. My control was reaffirmed and respect rippled through the wing. These moments were not rare, they were daily necessities. Even with this power, the emotional toll was immense. Loneliness was constant. Yes, I had influence, allies, and followers, but I could never fully trust anyone. Every handshake might conceal a knife in the metaphorical sense. Every whispered confidence could be used against me tomorrow. Human nature, exposed under pressure and confinement, was as unpredictable as it was brutal. The irony of prison life became clear. I had gained authority, status, and a reputation, yet I had sacrificed the very things that made life outside meaningful. Freedom, spontaneity, simple joys, gone. Instead, I had a meticulously constructed kingdom built on observation, control, and fear. The price was clear. The world outside was no longer mine, and I had become a master in a domain I could never leave. And yet, despite everything, I found moments of clarity. I understood the rules of this microcosm of society better than anyone else. I saw patterns in human behavior, learned to predict actions, to anticipate betrayal, and to leverage situations for survival. Prison had stripped away all illusions. In here, everything was raw, calculated, and consequential. Every choice defined the next, and mistakes were costly. By the end of each day, I would reflect on the delicate balance I maintained. It wasn't just about physical survival. It was about navigating a web of alliances, rivalries, and moral compromises. I had become both judge and executioner in this confined society, yet with every decision came the reminder of the life I had lost, the years, the youth, the freedom to make ordinary choices without deadly consequences. Authority in prison is a currency, but it is also a cage. I had wealth and influence, but I was bankrupt in freedom. I had power over others, but none over the world outside these walls. The question that haunted me was simple. Was it worth it? Every day, every decision reminded me that the price of survival was more than just the effort. It was the forfeiture of everything beyond these bars. Time in prison does strange things to a person. At first, every day is chaos, a sensory overload of sounds, smells, and constant tension. You learn quickly that vigilance isn't just recommended, it's survival. But as months turn into years, a strange transformation occurs. The chaos becomes routine. Fear, once sharp and jagged, mellows into a constant hum in the background, guiding every decision, every glance, every step. Psychologically, prison reshapes you. The outside world becomes a distant memory, fragmented and almost unreal. Memories of freedom, the smell of rain, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the simple pleasure of walking down an empty street begin to feel like stories you heard from someone else. In contrast, the hierarchy within these walls grows tangible, immediate, and critical. Respect here isn't handed out, it's earned, maintained, and defended daily. And I had learned the rules, the subtle cues, the invisible lines no one dared to cross. The hierarchy is a complex ecosystem. Each person operates not only with awareness of his own survival, but also an understanding of the alliances and rivalries around him. A misstep could trigger retaliation from a rival or loss of protection from your allies. I became adept at reading these signals. A fleeting expression, a whispered comment, the angle of someone's stance, all could indicate trust or threat. The mind, more than muscle, determined the outcome of almost every conflict. This awareness brought power, but also isolation. Loyalty in prison is fragile. Everyone is watching, testing, and calculating. The same men who laugh with you today could betray you tomorrow if it serves their survival or ambition. My decision to report the escape attempt had cemented my position, but it also ensured that no one fully trusted me. Trust became a currency more valuable than money, yet harder to spend. Each relationship was a careful negotiation between self-preservation and fleeting camaraderie. Regret crept into the quiet moments. I often wondered if I had acted differently at 18 in that nightclub, would my life have been anything like this? Could I have avoided the violent act, the long sentence, the world shrinking to concrete walls and iron bars? These thoughts were dangerous, distracting, weakening, but unavoidable. Every night I wrestled with the knowledge that my choices created a life I could not escape, and that the respect I earned here could never substitute for lost freedom. Yet amidst regret I discovered clarity. Prison stripped life down to essentials: survival, strategy, and psychology. I honed skills no one outside could understand, reading people in seconds, predicting behaviors, and manipulating outcomes without detection. Each decision became deliberate, calculated, with consequences carefully weighed. In this environment, mistakes were rarely forgiven. A lapse in judgment could cost you more than status, it could cost you your life. Physical strength remained critical, but it was the mind that ruled. I watched newcomers struggle, making errors in judgment, acting on impulse, or misjudging alliances. I guided them subtly, teaching them to navigate this world not out of charity, but because it reinforced my own position. A stable ecosystem benefited me. Chaos threatened me. Every controlled interaction reinforced my authority, proving I was more than brute force. I was strategy incarnate. As years passed, the lines between right and wrong blurred. Morality in here isn't defined by law, but by consequences. Helping one person might anger another. Refusing a request might prevent future betrayal. Each action had layers of ramifications, weaving a complex web of cause and effect that determined your survival and status. You learned to weigh not only the immediate impact, but the ripple effects throughout the microcosm of the prison society. My reflection often turned to youth lost. The world outside, moving, evolving, remained inaccessible. I saw it in the eyes of younger inmates, fresh to confinement, unshaped by its rules, yet eager to assert themselves. I saw myself at 18 in them, the brashness, the impulsiveness, the refusal to compromise. I realized that respect once earned was both a shield and a chain. It granted safety, influence, and survival, but at the expense of the life I might have led outside. Despite isolation, influence provided a perverse sense of freedom. Within these walls, I controlled outcomes that mattered. I could mediate disputes, prevent violence, and shape alliances. I had authority that extended beyond raw strength, relying instead on observation, foresight, and calculated action. In a way, the prison became a chessboard, each piece representing human motives and desires. Every move required precision, and foresight could save life and reputation. Yet control came with its own anxiety. The balance was delicate. One misjudged gesture or underestimated threat could cascade into disaster. Internal politics were ruthless, but the law outside was relentless too. Federal investigations, snitches, and corruption exposed vulnerabilities. Every interaction had to consider both the immediate environment and the distant consequences. Power in here was never absolute, only carefully negotiated and maintained. In these walls, I became both student and teacher of human behavior. I observed, I calculated, I acted, and I survived. Each passing year reinforced the brutal truth: freedom is relative. Some were free physically, but enslaved by chaos and fear. I was confined, yet ruled through intellect, authority, and respect. Survival demanded constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and emotional control. As I look back, I understand that prison didn't just punish, it transformed. I lost youth, liberty, and the world I might have known. But I gained an unparalleled understanding of human nature, strategy, and the delicate art of influence. The cost was immense, but in here I had carved out a domain where I could navigate chaos with precision. The lessons were harsh, the price lifelong, but they ensured survival in a world most could not comprehend. Years passed, and the walls that once confined me became strangely familiar. I knew every shadow, every echo, every unspoken rule. I had mastered the art of survival here, transforming from a scared 18-year-old into a figure both respected and feared. Yet, mastery came with a cost. My body aged in captivity, muscles hardened and then slowly stiffened, but the sharpness of my mind remained my greatest asset. The prison was a universe where intellect outweighed brute strength, and I had learned its laws better than anyone. The consequences of my past choices weighed heavily. I often replayed the nightclub incident, the kick that changed a man's life forever and sent me here for decades. Did I regret it? The answer was complicated. In some moments, the guilt was overwhelming. Seeing the life I had taken from him, the innocence of my own youth stolen by my impulsive actions. In other moments, I recognized that that choice, reckless as it was, set the path for every skill, every strategy, every ounce of influence I had cultivated. The duality of regret and necessity became a permanent companion. Prison politics had shifted over the decades. New generations rose, brash and impatient, challenging old codes of conduct. Yet I maintained my authority not through fear alone, but by understanding human nature and predicting behaviors with uncanny accuracy. Every alliance, every decision to intervene or observe was carefully calculated. I had become a linchpin in a network of control, a person whose word carried weight, whose judgment could prevent violence, and whose influence shaped daily life. The incident with the escape attempt still echoed in my mind. By reporting the plan, I had secured privileges, a safer cell, access to better commissary, and an informal understanding with the guards that my loyalty was valuable. Some called it betrayal. Others called it pragmatism. In this environment, morality was fluid. Survival demanded difficult choices, and power came to those who were willing to navigate the gray areas without hesitation. My decision had cemented my position, but also isolated me from some potential alliances. I had to balance respect and fear, compassion and ruthlessness every single day. I reflected often on life outside, on what I had lost. There were dreams I had never pursued, experiences I had never known, and a world that had moved on without me. Friends grew old, families changed, and society evolved while I remained behind bars. Yet here I found a different kind of life, a life where knowledge, cunning, and strategy dictated outcomes. In some ways, it was more controlled than the chaotic world I had left behind, but it came at the ultimate price: my freedom. Through decades of observation, I understood the patterns of human behavior with clarity. Fear, loyalty, greed, and ambition were constants, and every decision rippled outward, affecting not just me, but the entire ecosystem of the prison. I became a teacher in an unspoken school, guiding those who sought survival while subtly asserting my dominance. Each interaction was a lesson in psychology, negotiation, and influence, creating a microcosm where my understanding of strategy allowed me to thrive. But power in confinement is fragile. New threats emerged constantly: unpredictable inmates, shifting alliances, changes in administration, and federal scrutiny. I had to adapt, anticipating moves long before others acted. Patience became my weapon, observation my shield. I learned to balance caution with decisiveness, subtlety with visibility. One wrong move could undo decades of carefully cultivated influence. Each day was a test, and survival demanded perfection in judgment, timing, and emotional control. Even in isolation, I found moments of introspection. The silence of my cell at night brought thoughts of mortality, of legacy, and of what my life had truly become. Could I ever reconcile the choices that led me here? The answer was neither simple nor comforting. I had survived, gained respect, and carved a domain of control, but at the cost of years I would never reclaim. Freedom, once taken for granted, was now a concept as abstract as the life I had imagined at 18. I also reflected on loyalty, betrayal, and human fragility. Reporting the escape attempt had secured my position, but it left me morally conflicted. Some inmates never forgave, while others quietly respected my foresight. This tension was constant. Influence came with isolation, respect with suspicion. I realized that in prison, relationships are never straightforward. Each bond is weighed against survival, ambition, and fear. Understanding this was key to maintaining my place. Looking back, I saw that my journey was a series of calculated risks and inevitable consequences. I lost my youth, the chance at ordinary life, and the possibility of freedom outside. Yet I gained unparalleled insight into human nature, power, and strategy. Every act of courage, every decision to act or hold back, shaped my destiny within these walls. I became not only a survivor, but a strategist, a teacher, and in a sense an architect of the prison's internal society. Ultimately, I understood that life is defined by choices and their consequences, no matter where those choices occur. Prison stripped me of the external world but revealed the inner one: the power of intellect, the fragility of trust, and the necessity of strategy. I could have walked a different path, but I chose, consciously or not, to navigate this one, and in doing so I became a figure both respected and feared. Now, decades later, I am neither free nor entirely imprisoned. My body remains confined, but my mind is a kingdom of experience, insight, and authority. The youth I lost remains forever a ghost, a reminder of impulsive decisions and the cruelty of fate. The respect I earned is a testament to adaptability and understanding of human nature. I have survived, and in surviving I have mastered the art of living within the strictest limits imaginable. And in that mastery lies both triumph and tragedy. For I know that the world outside continues vibrant and evolving. But I will never again walk its streets as an ordinary man. I have become a legend in my own domain, a cautionary tale of power, consequence, and the human capacity to adapt. This is my truth, my story. A life forged behind bars, defined by choices and tempered by the relentless logic of survival. The story ends not with freedom regained, but with an understanding. Life in any form is measured not only by what you lose, but by what you learn to control when all else is stripped away. And I have learned to control everything within my reach.